Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. Two new movies made it into the top 5 movies for this weekend's domestic box office that ended on August 11th, 2024, but unsurprisingly, Deadpool and Wolverine remained number 1 as the highest grossing movie for the weekend. And the cumulative total for the top 5 movies at this weekend's domestic box office was about $136 million, which was a 17.4% decline over last weekend's similar cumulative total of $153.3 million. But before proceeding, I'd like to ask everyone to please like this video, please leave a comment, please subscribe to support this channel, and please press the bell to receive notifications. Thanks! As of this weekend, the 3 highest grossing movies, both domestically and worldwide, were Disney Pixar's animated movie Inside Out 2, Disney and Marvel Studios' MCU movie Deadpool and Wolverine, and Illumination Entertainment's animated sequel Despicable Me 4. Domestically, Inside Out 2 earned another $5 million this weekend and $4.5 million during the week to bring its current domestic box office total up to $636.5 million, keeping it as the only movie so far this year to break $600 million domestically. Internationally, the movie earned another $29.1 million to bring its current international box office total up to $957.3 million. So globally, Inside Out 2 earned another $38.6 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $1,593.8 million. It's the first movie that broke $1 billion in 2024, but as of this weekend, it's not the only movie to have done so. But it's still the only movie so far this year to have broken $1.5 billion globally. Further, Inside Out 2 has now earned $148.1 million, more than last year's highest grossing movie, Barbie, and its $1,445.6 million. In terms of estimated break-even points, Inside Out 2 has a reported production budget of $200 million, which, when multiplied by 2.5 and 3.0 respectively, to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, as well as the additional costs of marketing the movie and other miscellaneous costs that the studio pays above and beyond the production budget, yields an estimated break-even point range of $500 million to $600 million. Thus, Inside Out 2 has most definitely made bank, and I'll be projecting its possible final domestic and global gross box office earnings later in the video. Now, for those of you who have watched either of my previous 2 box office roundup videos from last week or the week before, or either of my videos about Deadpool and Wolverine that I had released before the movie had premiered, then you may remember me saying that the movie was most likely going to break $1 billion worldwide. And this weekend, it did. Domestically, the movie earned another $54.2 million during the weekend and $44.8 million during the week to bring its current domestic box office total up to $494.3 million, which keeps the movie as the second highest grossing movie domestically so far this year, and only the second movie to have broken $400 million domestically. So, Deadpool and Wolverine is now also the highest grossing R-rated movie domestically of all time by having surpassed the domestic box office earnings of 2004's The Passion of the Christ. The movie will also obviously break $500 million domestically before next weekend, and it will probably break $600 million domestically in about 3 to 4 weeks. Internationally, the movie earned another $106.7 million to bring its current international box office total up to $535.2 million. So globally, the movie earned another $205.6 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $1,029.5 million, making it only the second movie so far this year to break $1 billion globally. Deadpool and Wolverine is now the second highest grossing R-rated movie worldwide of all time, being just barely behind the global earnings of 2019's R-rated movie Joker, which it will very likely surpass to become the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time, probably before next weekend. It's also worth noting that Deadpool and Wolverine is now the first MCU movie since 2021's Spider-Man No Way Home to break $1 billion globally at the box office. And with its reported production budget of $250 million, when multiplied by 2.5 and 3.0, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $625 million to $750 million. Clearly, Deadpool and Wolverine has already made bank. Domestically, Despicable Me 4 earned another $8 million to bring its current domestic box office total up to $330.1 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $38.8 million to bring its current international box office total up to $477.1 million. So globally, the movie earned another $54.8 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $807.2 million, making it only the third movie so far this year to break $800 million globally. And for Despicable Me 4, with its reported production budget of $100 million, when multiplied by 2.5 and 3.0, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $250 million to $300 million respectively. Thus, Despicable Me 4 has already made bank. So this weekend's top 5 movies at the domestic box office included the following. Deadpool and Wolverine clung to number 1. Wayfarer Studios and Sony Pictures' romantic drama It Ends With Us opened at number 2. Universal Pictures, Warner Brothers, and Amblin Entertainment's sequel Twisters fell to number 3. Lionsgate Films' video game-based movie Borderlands opened at number 4 and is DOA. And finally, Despicable Me 4 fell to number 5. Since I already talked about the box office earnings for Deadpool and Wolverine, we'll move on to It Ends With Us. The movie opened with $50 million domestically and $30 million internationally for a global gross opening weekend box office total of $80 million, which means that the movie has already made bank, given that with its $25 million production budget, it only had a mid-range estimated break-even point of $62.5 million. So congratulations to Wayfarer Studios and Sony Pictures. Domestically, Twisters earned another $15 million to bring its current domestic box office total up to $222.3 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $8.8 million to bring its current international box office total up to $87.8 million. So globally, the movie earned another $35.3 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $310.1 million. Domestically, Borderlands opened with $8.8 million domestically, and internationally, according to Variety, it only earned $7.7 million for a global gross opening weekend box office total of only $16.5 million. Here, I want to point out that the movie's domestic opening weekend box office of $8.8 million was well within Box Office Pro's predicted domestic box office range of $8 million to $12 million, but closer to the lower end than the midpoint of $10 million. And I also want to point out that even Variety is calling Borderlands a flop, which it is, as I had said that it would be in a video that I had released on August 9th. Also, in this article, Variety again mentioned the claim from studio sources that international ticket pre-sales were equivalent to 60% of the movie's production budget. But for that to have been true, its international earnings should have been a lot closer to $69 million, which they clearly weren't, and which I had doubted they would be, as I had also said in my August 9th video. Now we'll skip Despicable Me 4 since I've already covered its weekend box office earnings. I'm also continuing to track several other movies that are no longer in the top 5, which includes the following. After 8 weekends in a row being in the top 5 domestic movies, Inside Out 2 fell to number 7. Paramount Pictures' sci-fi horror movie A Quiet Place Day 1 fell to number 12. Sony and Columbia Pictures movie Bad Boys Ride or Die fell to number 14. Apple Original Films movie Fly Me to the Moon fell to number 15. And still in theaters, at its 14th weekend showing clear desperation to make more money, Disney and 20th Century Fox's sci-fi movie sequel Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes clung to number 18. Since I already talked about the box office earnings of Inside Out 2, we'll skip that and go to A Quiet Place Day 1. Domestically, the movie earned another $475,000 to bring its current domestic box office total up to $138.6 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $800,000 to bring its current international box office total up to $122.2 million. So globally, the movie earned another $2 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $260.8 million. Domestically, Bad Boys Ride or Die earned another $185,000 to bring its current domestic box office total up to $193.3 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $1.8 million to bring its current international box office total up to $207.1 million. Thus, globally, the movie earned another $2.2 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $400.4 million. And the final projections that I had done for Bad Boys Ride or Die did show that the movie would very likely break $400 million globally, and it did. Domestically, Fly Me to the Moon earned another $125,000 to bring its current domestic box office total up to $20.3 million. Internationally, no new box office was reported for the movie, so its international box office total remains unchanged at around $17.8 million. So the movie's current global gross box office total rose slightly to $38.1 million. Domestically, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes earned another $35,000, keeping its current domestic box office total at around $171.1 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $102,000 to bring its current international box office total up to $226.2 million. So globally, the movie earned another $166,000 to bring its current global gross box office total up to $397.3 million. Now, to know whether these movies are going to break even or not, as well as how much money they might be losing, we need to look at their production budgets, which we can then multiply by 2.5 for a single mid-range estimated break-even point, or by both 2.5 and 3.0 for a broader estimated break-even point range. But if there's a reported value for the movie's marketing and distribution budget, we can add that to the movie's production budget for a total cost, and then multiply the sum by 2 to yield a more accurate estimated break-even point. For Twisters, with its reported production budget of $200 million, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $500 million to $600 million. For Borderlands, with its reported production budget of $115 million and its reported marketing and distribution budget of $30 million, that gives us a total cost of $145 million, which when multiplied by 2 yields an estimated break-even point of $290 million. For A Quiet Place Day One, with its reported production budget of $67 million, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $167.5 million to $201 million. For Bad Boys Ride or Die, with its reported high production budget of $100 million, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $250 million to $300 million. For Fly Me to the Moon, with its reported production budget of $100 million, that yields an estimated mid-range break-even point of $250 million. For Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, with its even higher $165 million production budget, we get an estimated break-even point range of $412.5 million to $495 million. In this video, I am no longer projecting what the final domestic or global gross box office earnings might be for the movies A Quiet Place Day 1, Bad Boys Ride or Die, Fly Me to the Moon, and Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, because their expected future earnings are currently too small or possibly non-existent. For A Quiet Place Day 1, with its current global gross box office earnings of $260.8 million and its estimated break-even point range of $167.5 million to $201 million, the movie has made bank. For Bad Boys Ride or Die, with its current global gross box office earnings of $400.4 million and its estimated break-even point range of $250 million to $300 million, the movie has made bank. For Fly Me to the Moon, with its current global gross box office earnings of $38.1 million and its estimated mid-range break-even point of $250 million, the movie currently stands to lose somewhere around $211.9 million in global gross box office revenue. For Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, with its current global gross box office revenue of $397.3 million and its estimated break-even point range of $412.5 million to $495 million, the movie currently stands to lose between $15.2 million to $97.5 million in global gross box office revenue. Then by dividing the global gross box office revenue losses by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, the affected studios currently stand to lose the following. For Fly Me to the Moon, Apple Original Films currently stands to lose around $106 million. For Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, Disney and 20th Century Fox currently stand to lose around $7.6 million to $48.7 million. And that now brings us to the movies whose final domestic and global gross box office revenues I am currently projecting, which includes Deadpool and Wolverine, Twisters, Borderlands, Despicable Me 4, and Inside Out 2. For Deadpool and Wolverine to project what the movie's final domestic box office earnings might be, I'll use a range of average weekly drops that are derived from the previous 33 MCU movies, whose overall franchise average weekly drop is 38.19%, with a standard deviation of 6.45%. And one standard deviation above and below the MCU's franchise average weekly drop gives me a range of 31.74% to 44.65%. And using that range, I can project that the final domestic box office for the movie may range from $617 million at the low end, $654.3 million at the mid-range, and $706.4 million at the upper end, which is a lower range than last week's projection. And by using the movie's current domestic share of 48.02%, which is almost exactly what it was last week, I can project that the final global gross box office for the movie may range from $1,285 million at the low end, $1,362.8 million at the mid-range, and $1,471.2 million at the upper end, which is also lower than last week's projection. So I don't believe that Deadpool and Wolverine will be able to outperform Inside Out 2. For Twisters, assuming a range of possible average weekly draws from 30 to 40%, I can project the final domestic box office for the movie may range from $262 million at the low end, $271.4 million at the mid-range, and $283.7 million at the upper end, which is a more narrow range than last week's projection. And by using the movie's current domestic share of 71.68%, which is nearly the same as last week's, I can project that the final global gross box office for the movie may range from $365.5 million at the low end, $378.6 million at the mid-range, and $395.8 million at the upper end, which is also a more narrow range than last week's projection. But unfortunately for the movie, that entire projected range falls short of its estimated break-even point range of $500 million to $600 million. So the movie still appears to be a flop, as it currently stands to lose somewhere on the order of $104.2 million to $234.5 million in global gross box office revenue, which, when divided by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, means that Universal Pictures, Warner Brothers, and Amblin Entertainment currently stand to lose around $52.1 million to $117.2 million. For Borderlands, assuming a range of possible average weekly draws from 30 to 40%, I can project that the final domestic box office for the movie may range from $22 million at the low end, $25.1 million at the mid-range, and $29.3 million at the upper end. Now, in my August 9th video, I said that I highly doubted that the movie's domestic share would be as low as 12.66%, based on Variety's reported insider claim that the international opening weekend box office was going to be 60% of the movie's production budget. Instead, the movie's actual current domestic share is a lot higher at 53.33%. And when I use that, I can project that the final global gross box office for the movie may range from $41.2 million at the low end, $47.1 million at the mid-range, and $54.9 million at the upper end. And what is the movie's estimated break-even point again? Oh yes, $290 million, which means that the entire projected final global gross box office range is far below what the movie needs in order to break even. In fact, the movie currently stands to lose somewhere on the order of $235.1 million to $248.8 million in global gross box office revenue, which, when we divide by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, means that Lionsgate Films currently stands to lose around $117.5 million to $124.4 million, which makes Borderlands one of the biggest flops for 2024. Now, as for the movie Despicable Me 4, given that it's actually the 6th movie in a franchise that began in 2010, I can use box office data from the franchise's previous 5 movies to calculate a franchise average weekly drop of only 27.18%, which is very good. And using the related standard deviation of 4.94%, I can create a statistically defined range of possible average weekly drops for Despicable Me 4 that's one standard deviation above and below the franchise average, which gives me a range from 22.24% to 32.13%. And using that range, I can project that the final domestic box office for the movie may range from $363.5 million at the low end, $371.9 million at the mid-range, and $383.2 million at the upper end, which is a more narrow range than last week's projection. And using the movie's current domestic share of 40.9%, which is lower than last week, I can project that the final global gross box office earnings for the movie may range from $888.8 million at the low end, $909.4 million at the mid-range, and $937 million at the upper end, which is slightly higher than last week's projection. So Despicable Me 4 is currently destined to remain the third highest grossing movie both domestically and worldwide behind Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine. And finally, for Inside Out 2, assuming a range of possible average weekly draws from 30 to 40%, I can project that the final domestic box office for the movie may range from $650.5 million at the low end, $653.7 million at the mid-range, and $657.7 million at the upper end, which is similar but more narrow than last week's projection. Then by using the movie's current domestic share of 39.93%, which is slightly lower than last week's, I can project that the movie's final global gross box office earnings may range from $1,629 million at the low end, $1,637 million at the mid-range, and $1,647 million at the upper end, which is slightly higher than last week's projection. Thus, Borderlands joins Twisters and Fly Me to the Moon as definite flops, while Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes remains a probable flop. But Deadpool and Wolverine, Inside Out 2, Despicable Me 4, A Quiet Place Day 1, Bad Boys Ride or Die, and It Ends With Us have all made bank. Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed to our channel. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and please feel free to share a comment. If you'd like to help support this channel, please press the red subscribe button, and please press the bell to receive notifications for new content. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Twitter by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.